Hi, welcome back to the auditorium. We will continue now with the first track. There will be two talks. And the first one is I Hate Writing Tests. That's why I use Hypothesis by Cheuk Ting Ho. The floor is yours.
Hello, thank you. Right. So I hope you enjoy the coffee break. There are sandwiches, which is to my surprise. But anyway, welcome back to the first talk. So this is my talk about hypothesis, and this is probably the most important slides because you would get the link to the slide, so you don't have to worry about the rest of it. And I'm still on Twitter, so you can, please tweet about me and follow me, whatever you like. You know, can't predict the future, so but you can still find me on Twitter. Also my website and stuff like blah blah blah. Before I start, who knows about hypothesis? Okay, so half of you. So, but who has used the Ghostwriter in hypothesis? Ooh, okay. I gotta give you something new, even though you have heard about hypothesis. So, I'm Cheuk, and this is the talk. So, who hate writing tests like I do? Ooh, okay, we're on the same page. Yay! So for me, there are a few things that really I really don't like when I write tests. I always stumble across it. Like it's kind of like it's like stepping on a Lego. It's really painful. So the first thing that I have trouble with is that sometimes like when import the code, I'm a very messy person, so some of the project I worked on in the past, the test is not sitting at the right place and like it just can't find the module, whatever. So importing the code is a problem. The second thing is organizing the test. Again, I'm not a very organized person, so sometimes I just add a test. For example, I write a new function. I need to write a unit test, right? Like all the good programmers do. So I create a test, but I don't know where to put it. It's just a bunch of jungle like of test files, and all the tests are sitting together, and I don't know where is where. Like where did I put the test? Forgot which file. Maybe here, maybe there. Yeah. And the other thing that I found is quite difficult is to find the right test case. Because a lot of times, you just okay, I would put in something to test, but does it help? Like how much case I need to test? Like, I've tested it's a string, put in some text there and stuff. Do I have to test another one? Is this like it's passed, the test passed, so the function work, but will there be cases that it actually doesn't work, especially when like you get, the user can put in whatever they like, then you kind of like you can't predict what the other person would do with your program, so it's a bit difficult. So today, good news, this 2 point of like organizing the test and think of the test case, I think personally, I can kind of get some help by using hypothesis. So we're gonna improve our test. So yeah, I'm Cheuk. I don't know why I put. Okay, yeah, I'm going to introduce myself now. It's a bit out of order, but I work for Alaconda. Hello. I have a few colleagues here as well. They will be speaking. Some of them. So talk to them and talk to me. And I work in open source project in the past. I love contributing to open source project. I'm still contributing to open source project when I have time. And I organize events. So I have a online conference, Pajamas, coming up soon. So I'll tell you a little bit more about it. And I stream on Twitch in the past. It's a bit of a fun thing to do during the pandemic. Not so much so today because, like, I am traveling. You can see that I'm here, I'm there. Like I'm not at home. So, but you can still find the videos. So, have you heard of property-based testing? It sounds very scientific. So what it is, right? So when I explain it to people, I would kind of explain it by kind of making a comparison between testing by example. So property-based testing is testing by property. And what we normally do, well, maybe you don't do it this way, but what I usually do is called testing by example, which is providing examples to test your things, right? Your function, method, whatever. So testing by property, the given is quite obvious, I would say, because you kind of know what this variable is supposed to have the type of the variables. You kind of know because, well, now we do typing. So if you don't know, then well, I mean Python is for you because you can duck type. But now since people are writing huge programs and typing has become more and more important in Python, so now we have typing. So that's actually quite obvious to have the property of your variable or input or things like that. Test by example, you have to think of what you are testing, right? You have to think of like what I should put in as a example input or example variable to test whether that works or not. So you have to think about it. The next thing that makes to like kind of compare them is that when you like I said, you have a giant program and you're typing everything, it's like everything's very neat and tidy. Good for you because property-based testing will work very well for you because everything, like I said, is given. All the variables and inputs are clearly typed that it's supposed to be an integer, it's supposed to be a decimal numbers and things like that. So good. Test by example, you have to think of, okay, now I am supposed to take a number. So what number do I test? Do I test positive number, negative number, 0? Do I test 0? Maybe I should test 0. So that's kind of thing you have to think about. Property-based testing, you will see in a bit that in hypothesis, we have a lot of strategy that helps you to find the edge case. So sometimes even you didn't think about it because you're using some strategy that is already created. So those edge cases can be found by the strategy, which compared to test by example, you have to think of what are the edge cases that I should test. Like for example, 0, right? 0 is a bit funny, so we should probably test it. But if you're using a strategy, maybe 0 is already included, so you don't have to worry about it. So it sounds very convenient. So yeah, like how does hypothesis do it? Like you talk about strategy and all this stuff. Is it very complicated? Is it very difficult to use? Like is it as complicated as machine learning? Well, it's not. You only need the most basic case. You only need 2 things. The first thing is like you would use some decorator for your test, which is kind of something similar to what you may do with your PyTest. PyTest provide a lot of things you can add to a test function, and it's kind of similar to that. You just put a decorator there and some strategy. So like I said, hypothesis already provides some strategy for you, so you don't have to write your own strategy, but that's possible. You can create your own strategy, but most of the case is already there, so you don't have to necessarily need to write your own strategy to generate the test data. So good. So this is an example. You can find it actually on the official documentation website. I just copied it from there. So it's fairly straightforward. You have a function that encodes some kind of string. I don't know what a string would look like input there, but this is the encoding function. This is the decoding function. So yay. I think a lot of code will have things like that, right? Things come in a pair. One is doing task A, and then the other is doing the reverse of task A. So like that, very, very straightforward. So let's test this. Okay, so for those of you who are like eagle eye and like kind of see that, like dry run it and may already find some problem, but maybe you can't, so you gotta test it. So this is the test using hypothesis. So it's very small kind of test, test file. So we only need to import the things from hypothesis. So the first thing need to import is given. Given is the decorator that we add to the test, so we know that we're using hypothesis. And the second thing is the strategy. So because we are encoding the test and decoding something, so we're using text. And you add the decorator there. And then you said given, so I have to provide a strategy, which is a test. So okay, that's fine. It's a text, and um, you have it as a it's like using fixture. You just put it there, and then it's available for you to use. And now it's actually we're doing a round trip, so encoding it and decoding it should become itself. So let's do it. Let's try to do it. Oops. Oh, okay. Let's click it again and make it very big. Oh, okay. So here we have the demo is a bit small, isn't it? Okay. Sometimes I don't know how big it should be. I hope you can see it. So I have something here. So I have a bunch of file. I have the code, which is exactly the same thing as I had show you in the slides. So let's do a hypothesis test. So I already written the test because of it's like the cooking show, because of time constraint. I already have done it. Like that kind of thing. So so you can see it's because it's short. It's just like at the bottom. So import my code as code and then test it. Right. Okay. So let's do a PyTest. So I love using PyTest. So but before that, it's a bit difficult to see. Okay, so I love PyTest, so let's use PyTest, and then let's run our test. So, oops, what happened? I don't like the red, but actually it's a good thing we have the red, because we found something that goes wrong. When we try to run the code, and if the input string is an empty string, then we have a problem. So yep. So I don't have the eagle eye, and I can't dry run it. I don't know that if I put an empty string there, I would get an error. So instead of doing the job, I got an error. So maybe you think, oh, maybe I will have another function to check like whether it's an empty string or not. But I mean, but that's after, right? Like now you kind of know what will happen, and you can either sort sort it here, or like or kind of making sure that nobody can put in an empty string in your encoding. I don't know, but we found a bug, so it's good. Let's go back to the slides. So yeah, it's all in the documentation. You can find it. So all is good, right? Like now I can use hypothesis in my test file. I can still do like PyTest like I normally do and things. But I know you are not satisfied, because if you are like me, you are very lazy. You don't even want to write a single line of code of tests. So what should we do? We have Ghostwriter. The Ghostwriter, by the name of it, is that as if there's a ghost that follows you and write the test for you. So great. So we'll use typing. So I hope that you are using typing for your code, because if you're not using typing, the Ghostwriter can't help you too much. It will still write the test for you, but it's not as good. So what happened is that the Ghostwriter will use typing as a hint, and then it will find the right strategy. So that's the bare minimum. You have to at least show that what kind of type of that variable is. Like Ghostwriter is not that smart. They can understand your code that much that know that what type it should be if you are not using typing. So yeah, so it'll pick the right strategy if you have typed your input and variables. And it's also come with a CLI tool, so you don't have to even pull out your VS Code or Vim or whatever that you're using. You just type in the command line and voila, a test. And also for those of you who love Black, who is like formatting your code, I mean, we are all lazy, right? We want something to do automatically. Like Black is formatting our code automatically. So the test that's generated by the Ghostwriter, if you have Black installed, it will also use Black to format the test file for you. So everything is ready to use. So this is just one line in the command line, and it will work. So let's have a look. gzip, right? Okay. Let's try gzip. And whoop, we have a lot of things. This looks familiar, isn't it? These are actually tests. Like I don't have to write anything for gzip if I want to test gzip, and that's how it works. you can see that like we got a lot of different. So how like how hypothesis like the ghostwriter know how to test the code is a bit magic, right? So let's sit back a little bit like and have a look at what's going on in Ghostwriter. So in Ghostwriter, there's actually again a few not strategy but like a few things that Ghostwriter will do. So there's a few different type of Ghostwriter. Let's put it this way. So the first type is called fuzz. So fuzz is just like, oh, if fuzz see there's a function or there's a method, then fuzz will just try to run it and see if there's error. And sometimes, we will have some exception and stuff, so we're expecting error. So you can also kind of customize a little bit and say like, oh, there could also be an error. Don't worry too much about it because that's expected. Things like that. So yeah, so that's a fuzz, and it's just run all the function and see if it works. So this is a bit. So there are more than just run the function. So this is something that is another strategy that the ghostwriter will use to generate the test. Is that, for example, if I have a method. So this is less automatic. You can't just like type gzip like the one that I did, but this one you can just like you can tell the ghostwriter, oh, I want to test using this method. So independent is very difficult to pronounce. So so you can tell the ghostwriter that I have a function. You should use this to test this function. So what this is doing is that, for example, you have a method that calling it once should be already completed, and if you're calling it on the completed thing again, it should not change. So for example, this one I'm sorting something. So if the method is working properly, if you have sort something once, if you sort it again with the same method, it should not change, right? Because it's already sorted. So this is what it's testing. And it's useful if you have a method that should work like that. I don't know how to explain it, but it works like that. If you call it twice, it should make no difference than calling it once. So that's what this. The other thing, this is my favorite, round trip. You see the case, right? The encoding and decoding case. This is exactly the thing that you can use it to test those things. Like it's a round trip. It means that you encode it, decode it. It should be back to square one, which is the original thing. So a lot of things comes like that. JSON dumps, JSON loads. We all know, it works in a pair. So round trip should work for them. There's another thing we can use the ghostwriter to generate tests for. So this is equivalent. So equivalent is a bit tricky. You have to already have a function that you trust that it works, and you are comparing that to other functions that more or less do the same thing. So if so you can test a function whether it works, just like the other function. So for example, here this is an example that I made up. What if I want to write my own power? Like the math, power function, and maybe your student, if you're teaching someone coding, like this is something like from the textbook, right? They would probably write something like that, and then you can do a test to see like, oh, whether it works just like the function come with the math library. That is probably correct, right? The math library come with Python, so it should be trusted that it's correct. So you can test it like that. Yeah. So there are two more ghostwriter that you could test things like that. The other, but these are less common because binary operation. How often you write a binary operation, right? Sometimes, but not all the time. So so if you have write some binary operations, you can test it with binary operation. And if you're using NumPy, there's also ufunc that tests NumPy array. So very specific use case for this too. Yeah, so let's try a little bit more. So let's go back to where we were. So we have, so yeah, there's the test two there. So what it is, I'm not showing you yet, but remember my code. So so we have encoding and decoding. So let's see if we can ask the ghostwriter to do that for us. So let's do a hypothesis. Oh, hypothesis, right? My code. Oh, so this is the test that. So this is the test. It says, well, this is the test generated by hypothesis. This is what it says in the comment. So you have the test created, right? So here. So I don't have to write a single line of code. And how do I run it, right? Oh, put it in a file. So I already did. So I will show you. It's actually the test2 file. Oh, sorry. Yep. So put that in a file with .py at the end, of course. Then you can run it. So pytest test2 .py, and you see we have the similar error that we got before, that it's not working for an empty input string. So there you go. So you don't even need to write the test. You just have my code, and then you can just like Ghostwriter, write the test for me, and then save it as a file, and then run it with pytest. Or you can actually have unit tests. You can when you use the hypothesis write, you can add in some options. Actually, let me see if I can. So you can see the options here as well, I think. Yeah. So you can add the option. For example, oh, I'm not using pytest. I want to use a unit test. You can say, I want to use unit test. Style equals to unit test. Can you see that here? So yeah, so the test file generated will be in unit test. So cool. That's how you do it. And so before I end the talk, I know it sounds like, oh, you should use hypothesis. It's really cool. It's like you don't even need to write tests. But like everything else, there's a few things that you have to think about before you use it. So first of all, the test can be run slower than what you like vanilla when you write the test yourself. Because generating the strategy also take time, right? So if you have an extensive library, you can't just like make everything a hypothesis to test everything, right? Because some of them could be slow. So you have to use it like cleverly. Like if it's something that, oh, for example, this is actually very good for hypothesis because I the type of the input output very clear, but maybe it's a user input, then I don't want to think about what a user would put in, then you can use this. And the test can be a little bit harder to understand because like if you write the test and use, for example, you use parameterize in PyTest, you write down all the cases yourself, right? You kind of, I'm testing A equals to this and B equal to this, right? But for hypothesis, it's just, oh, A is a text, B is a text, whatever it is. So sometimes, you don't prefer it, so you prefer having the example shown to you. In hypothesis, you can set some example that like, oh, I'm definitely testing that. No compromise. Don't test other things unless you test this. That's also fine, but sometimes you have to choose what approach you use to write your tests. And also, if your code, you just done it with a weekend, just hacking around and things like that, and no typing whatsoever, Ghostwriter won't help too much because instead of choosing the right strategy for you, the output of the Ghostwriter will just say, oh, you should kind of find a strategy for this thing because otherwise I will test nothing. So it's not very helpful. So yeah, I think that's the end of my talk. And this is a conference online happening in November, which is this month, the end of this month. So register a ticket is free to register. You can, then you can join Discord and, watch all the live stream and stuff. So check out the website and see you around.
For this interesting talk. I hate tests as well, and maybe I like them more, a little bit more now. We have time for one or two more questions, so feel free. Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there use cases for the Ghostwriter with the Django testing?
Django testing. Oh, that's really good actually. I don't think we have something specifically for Django, but I can see that like it would be useful because sometimes Django you will have user input and stuff, and you see the encoding decoding case is already a very good example. That what if someone doesn't put in anything and just click submit and then it's an empty string and then you would have that. So yeah, I haven't used it with Django myself. Maybe you can try. Yeah.
Thanks, really cool. So I've always seen the great promise of hypothesis and property-based testing, but figuring out the properties of what I'm doing, the business logic, is sometimes the same as just writing my business logic twice. So are there any good resources for learning about how to start thinking about this, the quick wins, like idempotent, that sound really great. But what are some other learning resources for someone looking into this? Because the API is great, I just need to learn how to use it.
Yeah, I would say that if you want to start learning more about Hypothesis or start using Hypothesis, the official documentation website is the best place because I have worked with the maintainer of Hypothesis, Zach. He's very he has a beginners in mind that he makes sure all the error messages are very clear. He makes sure that things are easy for people. So check out the documentation. Also, the Ghostwriter is a good first step to try it out because it generates the test for you. You can customize it. It's not like, oh, I run the code and save it in the file and just run it. You can change it. You can go there and fine tune it yourself. So it's a very good place to start. Yeah.
I see no more questions, so thank you very much again.